This podcast is sponsored by Lightens. Lightens, your best source for OE quality automotive and heavy-duty accessory drive tensioning devices. We know tensioners because we invented them.
Dave, welcome to AMN Drivetime, sponsored by Lightens. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Bill.
Dave, I think that I've known you my entire career in the automotive aftermarket. And I know that you were close friends with my elder sister, Becky.
Yeah.
And your career path is really quite impressive. Tell us about your journey from Votech school to race car developer to highly successful automotive aftermarket executive.
Okay. You got a lot.
Start from the beginning, baby.
Okay, you got a lot of time, eh?
Well,
well, I'll try and hit the high points in it, but I think it's important to talk about the start.
okay.
And the start was in the 7th grade. In the 7th grade, I had to do a book report, and I hated to read. And I got a little book called The Little Red Car, of which I have a copy yet today. Okay. And The Little Red Car was a story about a guy that had an MG. It was all fiction, and he raced an MG in road races. And I decided in the 7th grade that I was going to become a sports car racer. So from the 7th grade until I was about 30, that's all I wanted to do. And as a result, when I was in high school, I went to a Votech school, and I spent 4 years, 4 hours a day in diesel mechanics. We weren't called technicians then because we didn't have computers.
Right.
But I became a certified diesel mechanic by the time I graduated from high school. Never worked a day as a diesel mechanic. My drugstore manager boss for my part-time job in high school, which was working in a drugstore as a merchandise manager, the drugstore boss convinced me to go to college and take business. So I went to college and took business. While I was in college taking business, my friends who were older than me started racing their sports cars. They had more money, too. I was born in Miami Beach, by the way, and I was on the poorer side of Miami Beach. So the guys that were on the better side of Miami Beach were racing their sports cars. So I started building engines for them and helping them prep their cars. And they let me drive their cars often. So that's how I started life, was wanting to be a race car driver and getting into building engines. So I built engines. The drugstore manager convinced me to go to college. While I was at college, I built more engines and eventually became a salesman for a distributor selling at drugstores, and still built more engines. Got my competition license when I turned 21 years old, because that's how old you had to be back then to get a competition license. Started racing a little bit and evolved into and away from the sales of drugstore items to become a race car shop owner, engine builder, and driver. And that's how I got that far. So I raced cars, won many national races and regional races, set some lap records, had a business partner who had a lot of money and he was an amateur, 20 years my senior, wanted to be a sports car champion. Came to me and said, I've got the dough, I'll pay all the bills, let's go national racing. So we teamed up in 1974 to run the national circuit. We ran 21 races, 86,000 miles towing in 1 year, and ran a national circuit. We did that for several years. We were doing really good. I was working 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and as most people racing that weren't born rich, I wasn't making much money. So I decided that I should get a job. So I told my multimillionaire, self-made millionaire partner, who had taken, incidentally, 4 companies public in his life, I told him that what I was going to do, and he said to me, what are you going to do? If you're not going to race, which is all you've ever wanted to do, and we're doing really good, what do you want to do? And I looked at him, and I never forgot. I looked at him, and I pointed, and I said, I'm going to be you. Because I saw what he had and how he lived and how he did it. And sitting next to a guy for 86,000 miles in a motorhome pulling 2 race cars, you learn a lot of things.
Yep.
So I often say I got my business degree riding next to Don Courtney, my partner. So, so I stopped and I went to work for Dana as a salesperson. Started in the field in Florida as a field salesperson.
So Dave, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Dare we ask you what year this is, or is that a state secret?
No, this would have, when I went to work for Dana, would have been 1977.
Okay.
Because I had a 77 Chevy company car. So I went to work for them. Still raced my car a little bit to keep my national and my FIA license. I actually won the last national race I ever drove, a car that I had designed and built from scratch, and won the race. And it was the last race I ever ran that car in, the last national race. And I did it the first year I worked for Dana. And then I stopped racing and worked for Dana. And my partner also told me that night at dinner when I stopped racing, if you work as hard at business as you work at racing, you'll be surprised how sorry the competition is. And I never forgot that, and I've continued to be surprised. So so I went to work for Dana, 8 years, 8.5 years, had 7 promotions. I ended up being national sales manager, working for a guy named Bill Herring, my second great mentor in my life behind Don Courtney, the race guy. Worked for Bill Herring at Dana for eight years, and as national sales manager, had a competitive offer come in from a Dana competitor in Germany that doubled my salary or my income. And when you're in your early 30s, mid 30s, you kind of don't pass up doubling your income.
No way.
So with tears in my eyes, I left Dana and went to work running an engine parts company for North America for the distribution, sales, and marketing of it for a German company that owned it here. Worked there 2 years. Didn't get along with them very well. I was a Dana guy. I had Dana philosophies. I'd been taught by Dana. I worked like Dana. And so I didn't get along well with that company. It wasn't their fault. It was probably more my fault than anybody. And worked with them. Did that for 2 years, but learned distribution. That was where because at Dana we were just a sales force. We were a sales and marketing force, and the sales and marketing division. This company, I had distribution centers, and I had order fill to worry about, and I had forecasts to worry about for production forecasts. So I got to do that. But after 2 years, I left there. A really good race friend of mine, one of my best friends, had an industrial chrome plating company in Toledo, where Dana was. And he said, "Why don't you come help me with my family company I inherited, because we don't know anything about sales and marketing." So I spent a year creating and developing and helping him build a sales and marketing program. And in that year, and you'll start to see a trend here, Bill, in that year, I didn't learn distribution and I didn't learn sales. What I learned that year was working with tool shops and die shops and manufacturing plants. I learned the industry part of the job, which a sales and marketing person doesn't usually get exposed to. So I really learned what the factories were doing and what it took for them to work productively and how they were doing it. So I spent a year with him, and a friend of mine worked for a company called Roll, which was called Roll Manufacturing, which kind of puts it, the name says it all. And they had two sons that inherited the business, and they were manufacturing engineers. And their father had passed away that had founded the business, and they had nobody to do sales and marketing, so they said, "Go to work for us and do our sales and marketing." So I spent 13 years at Roll being the president or becoming the president of their sales, marketing, and distribution division. At Roll, I learned to couple their punch press steel manufacturing operations and productivities into the marketing, into the sales. And sales is really just a function of marketing anyway. It's just one of the pieces. So I really learned how all of that went together and how it worked. And Roll was kind of the master's degree of my industry experience. That's what I call Roll. So Ben Dixon, the president of Bosch for North America, was a very good friend of mine from the Automotive Sales Council, of which I'm the executive director of. And Automotive Sales Council is 100 members that all work at jobs like the president of Bosch North America or the president of Roll. And he offered me a job to come there to work at Bosch, to work as to try and help them. I was going to be the general manager of a product group that had not made money in a long time. So it was this product group sitting there in this big successful company, but they just couldn't get it to make any money. So I joined him, and 18 months later turned a profit. They made me vice president of sales for national accounts, and a couple years later my dad got sick and I retired. But I'm not really retired because I keep having people come up with interesting things. I love the aftermarket. I'm an aftermarket person. That's all I've ever been. In fact, when I was at the Chrome Company, I remember telling my friend I spent half my day on the phone with all my aftermarket buddies. And so that's what I am, as an aftermarket person. So I still work. I run the Automotive Sales Council, like I said, which is a group that's been around for 65 years, networking and meeting and getting together. And so I do that. So I'm retired, but I'm kind of not retired. So
Yeah, you are a quintessential aftermarket guy.
yeah.
So Dave, I've noticed we had lunch earlier. We're at our headquarters in Akron today. We had lunch earlier and we're here. And I noticed you have a gold ring on your left hand there. That doesn't look like a wedding ring.
No.
What's the significance of that gold ring?
Well, it looks like a college ring. You know, a lot of people think, what college did you go to?
Right.
Or what university did you go to?
Yeah.
Well, it is my education ring, and what it is, it's a ring as for winning. My partner, I helped my partner win the national championship for Formula V's in 1981, and this is the ring you get for doing that. In fact, he was driving that year, and this ring has a little wrench on it because I was the crew chief. So, but that ring I wear yet today because that is my master's degree ring. That's where I learned most of the strategies and tactics that I've used to turn around 3 or 4 companies or divisions. Because I've been literally racing cars in business. I've been racing businesses since I quit racing cars. And it's all the same. It's all competition. You're competing for market share to get sales, to get profits. And so it's just a big race. I've been racing businesses now for 30 some years.
So Dave, taking that into account, longtime aftermarket guy, what's the secret sauce for sales and marketing success in the aftermarket? Do you have a secret sauce?
Yeah, I'd say there's 2 big things, okay? A few things, but first is people believed in me, and people still believe in me. People believed I could build their engine. People believed I could drive their car. People believed I could run their business. People believed that I could, and still do, that I could manage or run their trade association. I could be on the leadership team of AutoCare, which was then called AAIA. So I'd say it was the trust or the belief that people believed in me. And that's a position which I'll talk about a little bit in a couple minutes if we can.
Okay.
But the position is that people believed in me. And when people believe in you to give you all of those opportunities, you can't not do it. You can't let them down. You can't not help them succeed. You owe it to them. You have to do it. And that's kind of the way I feel. So that the belief part was that, and the other part was, if I could go one more, because I had two big pieces to that in answering that. The other part, my race partner said to me once driving along, and he was talking about another company he took public, the fourth one. He never graduated from the 8th grade. He was 20 years younger than me. He was a 50s guy, you know. And I said, how did you take 4 companies public and you never got past the 8th grade? And he said, I read books. He said, you don't have to go through the whole school thing if you read the books. He said, and he said, it's surprising how many people love to tell people what they did and how they did it. He said, they write it all down so you can read it. And so he said, I read the books. And so I've done that. And I'll give you a compliment for helping my career, to your dad and to Becky and to all your editors and your publishers. When I was working at Dana and afterwards, I read every Babcox publication as well as some others, okay? I read every publication every month, nose to tail. Even though I was in the engine parts business, I read the body shop stuff. I read all of that stuff. I read every ad. I'm probably one of the few people you've met that reads an ad and says, why do you think they wrote that way to say that in that ad? What are they trying to accomplish with the reader? I read. And there were 3 big books in my life. Can I tell you about them?
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Okay. Do the first one. First one, Positioning, Battle for Your Mind. Battle in Your Mind. Positioning the Battle in Your Mind by Al Reese and something Trout. Okay? That book talks about positioning, picking a position. It talks about how rather than trying to do everything or try to be everything, trying to be everything that an engine gasket manufacturer is, trying to be everything that every engine gasket customer wants, pick a position. Pick a spot that's weak for the other people. Pick a spot maybe that they're not even interested in, and focus on that and make yourself look like and know and fit that position so that when a customer or potential customer says, I need a retail gasket line, you're the only choice. Because the others may be bigger than you. They could be the big giant gasket companies that sell to the full line WD with all the coverage, but they don't have feature benefits on their box. They're not the first gasket line to put a barcode on a UPC code on their box. They're not the first gasket line to do all the retail kind of things. So, and then go to the customer and say, I know you got this over here, and I know they're a great gasket company, but they're really for the big full line commercial account guys. I'm for your 200 store retail chain. This is back in the do-it-yourself times too. So when you got a do-it-yourselfer, my gasket line is much better for them. It doesn't have coverage for tractors like they need for NAPA,
Right.
but it's the gasket line for you. That's my position. They can't compete with me for that position. They're too big. They're too heavy. They got too much expense.
Right.
So Positioning the Battle for Your Mind, number 1 book. Number 2 book, 9 Nations of North America. Okay? You can look at me yet today, even though I'm supposed to be retired, but when I worked a lot, you could tell for sure. You could look at me and tell who I was talking to and where they grew up by how I dressed that day. The 9 Nations of North America talks about how each part of North America was settled by different people. Some from the Netherlands, some from from Italy, some from, and it gives all the different pieces. And it shows the personalities. And when you watch political stuff today, it's amazing. The book is still true, and it's 25, 30 years old. So the 9 nations of North America told me how to deal with somebody that I was negotiating with or trying to sell or trying to market to. If I'm in a discussion with somebody, or, good example, if I'm going to visit the retired now Vice President of Merchandising, Executive Vice President of Merchandising at AutoZone, before I would ever go, I found out who it was, I found out where he grew up, I found out when he grew up, and I found out a little bit about him. So when I go there, I know the fellow is from the Chesapeake Bay area. I know that his parents had sailing in their blood. I know what his background is. So when I go there, I know I'm dealing with a person, not that lives there anymore. Now he lives in Memphis, or then he did. But I'm dealing with the person that lived in Memphis now, but he grew up in the Chesapeake Bay area. I'm dealing with a person that grew up in Kentucky. I'm dealing with a different personality. I'm dealing with a person that grew up in Miami, Florida. Different personality, very much like New Jersey. but so that book teaches you that. That book and the other 2 books, by the way, every time I showed up to help a company turn around, the first thing I did was go to my administrative assistant and say, order these 3 books, order a copy for everybody in the staff, and I would sit down and say, read those 3 books or we're not going to get along. That was what we did. The 3rd book, and I just told Amy about it today, called The Goal by, I think it's called Elia Goldratt. The Goal talks about a thing called, they call it bottlenecks. I call it, but it's a manufacturing book, but it applies to everything you do in your life. And it's a great book, and those 3 books made me succeed.
So Dave, I understand your favorite saying when you taught at Northwood is, quote unquote, when making a decision for your company, remember that this is not the auto parts business. This is the money business. Talk to us about that.
Well, when I came up with that saying was for the students at Northwood at the aftermarket management degree program.
Yep.
And I would go lecture there several times a year. I actually eventually built an online course with several people that were retired also, and some not retired. We built an online course for the same degree program that I got the University of the Aftermarket when I was chairman of the fund building those courses. And then I taught those. But those students would often get into the coolness of the cars, the neatness of the cars, the neatness of driving the cars, and the neatness of cars. And a lot of companies do the same thing. They get into their features. I've sat with a lot of big shot sales executives that'll talk all about the coolest new feature they got. And they're talking to a person, guy or lady, that owns a business that's paying bills, that's paying salaries, that's trying to make their assets grow. They're not there to talk about cool parts. They're in the money business. And I've always told people, this is not cool parts. This is the money business. You're here so your company can make more profit, build more assets. That's why you're here. This is the money business, not the parts business. Parts just bring you the money.
So Dave, you are a big advocate for volunteering your time for a variety of industry organizations. I'm going to list them here. The list is impressive. After I list them, just for the benefit of the AMN audience, what are the biggest benefits you see having been so involved in all these organizations? So, chairman of the Auto Care Association, president, Automotive Sales Council. Chairman, Engine Repower Council, President, National Engine Parts Manufacturers Association,
Does it put me to sleep, Bill? Or is it?
Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the University of the Aftermarket Foundation, Chairman of the Global Automotive Aftermarket Symposium, which had a long run, by the way.
Yeah, we did.
Long,
Mort Schwartz
started, long run. Director of ACA, Car Care Professional Network. So big volunteer activity in your career. Just what are the benefits there for you, for the industry? Talk to us.
This is going to be an answer you probably don't expect. First, it's good and it makes you feel good, and it's nice to do. And you hear people say, I'm trying to pay back the industry and all that stuff. I did it for me. And anybody that is a volunteer that's young in their career should do the volunteering for them. It's good for them. It helped me network. It helped me learn about all pieces of the industry. It helped me meet people that would buy things from me. It helped me meet people that would hire me. It helped me meet people that would help me in all kinds of ways. It's good for you. Do it for you. When people used to say, I used to do all these things. In fact, I used to write articles for Babcox too. And now you all used to pay me to write articles, but I always said I did that for my sailboat money. That's how I got money for my sailboats. But it was for my career. When I can remember walking into a distributor one time in Washington State I'd never met in my life, and I was the vice president of a company, and the sales managers brought me in there, and we walked through the door, and the first words out of a guy's mouth were, I love that last article you did Encounter Me in. That was and he talked all about that story. I had instant credibility. Instant credibility. If I wanted somebody to hire me or if I wanted somebody to consider me for something, I had instant credibility. It was the volunteering. It was every time they wanted me to do something, I did it. Every time they wanted me to work on something, I did it. My friends at Dana used to say when we were younger, they'd say, why are you here working on Saturdays? Why are you in the office working at night? You should be doing that work during the week, but instead you're off in Chicago at an Asia office, or you're off at AAIA back in the Bethesda days. What are you doing all of that stuff for? And I used to just smile because they didn't get it. Nobody knew them. Everybody knew me. True story. When Bill Herring was the president of Dana's Automotive Aftermarket, the national sales manager was promoted to go to Canada. He went to Canada. Bill Herring came and I told him I wanted a job. He says, you're too young. You can't have the job. I said, Bill, I want that job. I can do that job. At that point, I was the marketing manager. He said, you're too young, and I've got a long line of people with more seniority than you who have been with the company many, many years. I can't give you that job. He came to me a couple weeks later and said, we're making a national sales manager. And I'll never forget this. He said, everybody knows you, and you know every one of our customers. Got the job. Volunteer for yourself. It's good for the industry, but volunteer for yourself.
So Dave is a longtime aftermarket guy, which we've established. By default, you've traveled a great deal. Trade shows, sales calls, industry meetings.
Yeah.
You've been all over. Are there any tales from the road, PG for our audience, please, that you can share that were especially memorable in the last many years of your aftermarket travel log?
Yeah, I'll give you some race ones, and I'll give you a business one. I don't know if they're funny or if they're silly, but so we're in a motorhome, a big long motorhome, and we're pulling a two race car trailer behind the motorhome. So we're like 1 million feet long, and we're in Savannah before I-95 was complete. That shows you how old I am. And so in Savannah, there was a bridge that went over the Savannah River, and it was 2 lanes. It was 1 lane coming, 1 lane going. and we get to Savannah when work is letting out on Thursday night, because we're on our way to a place called Summit Point, a racetrack just outside Washington, D.C. So it's Thursday night. We're driving up from Miami, Florida with the race cars, and we get to the base of the bridge, and you have to pay a toll, and traffic is lined up forever, going both ways, because it's rush hour, and this is how they all get back into South Carolina. So the motorhome pulls up, we pay the toll at the bridge, we start to go up the bridge, we get about one motorhome and truck length up the bridge with all the cars behind us, and the motorhome conks out. Now we're stuck on the bridge with all this traffic behind us, honking their horns, and we can't get over the bridge, but we can't back up. And we learn that if we pump the accelerator pump, this is before fuel injection, if you pump the accelerator pump and turn the ignition, it starts. But the motorhome simply goes, wah, and dies. That's all it does. And if you pump it again, wah, and it dies again. So my partner, the millionaire businessman, he takes the key in the gear shift, and I pump the accelerator, pump, 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 and he goes, wah, drops it in gear, and the motorhome leaps, boom, and dies, boom, and dies. We crank it up, boom, and dies, and we hop the motorhome and the trailers over to the top of the bridge, and we roll down the other side, and we roll off the road in South Carolina onto the grass, and we run around and close all the motorhome curtains, and everybody goes by us yelling and screaming and honking their horn for like 30 minutes. So that shows you sometimes how big the big shots are at race. So that was one of my favorite ones.
Great story.
So I'm in Gainesville. We test in qualifying the two cars, because we both ran a car. We test our Formula cars, but we're running a test during qualifying. But there's going to be another qualifying session after that. So we're going to test these things now, and we'll qualify the next session. Well, it rains the next session. So we end up qualifying dead last. So we're like 30 cars back. So I'll accelerate this up and skip some of the details. We walk up the line of cars to all of the other drivers who we know, and we say, you know that we should be up 2 or 3 or first or second. You know we're fast enough that we should be up in the front. This is what we did in qualifying, and this is why we're back here. We're just letting you know that when they drop the green flag, Don's going to come by on your left, because he's gridded on the left, and Caracci's going to come by on your right, and we're going by you flat out, and if you pull out, we're going to have so much momentum, we're going to crash. So don't pull out of line until you see us go by, because if you do, we're going to crash. And so we tell them this. I must have been full of myself back then, you know. So we tell them this, and they start the race. And make a long story short, my partner ends up winning a race. I end up coming up to a guy that won't get out of the way for a lap, and the guys are around him can't get by him, and I knock the guy off the track, but in the process of knocking him off the track, I catch his tire and I flip the car. So the car goes end over end, it comes down on a roll bar, bang, bounces up, goes end over end again, comes down on a roll bar again, boom, goes end over end, the nose flies off, it's gone, comes down upside down, and I'm laying upside down on the track. They have corner workers at sports car races, and the corner workers are there to help you. So the car comes down upside down on the track, and you hear all the other cars going, whoa, 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 and then it's quiet. There's nothing. So you undo your seatbelt, you're upside down. You undo your seatbelt, and you find out, because you haven't really flipped before, that when you undo your seatbelt and the car's upside down, that with the new aerodynamics of the new cars, your helmet won't fit between the body of the car and the track. So now you're hanging upside down with no belt, laying on your head and your helmet, waiting for the guys to come get you out of the car. So you're laying there and you hear, and that's the tennis shoes of the corner workers. And they run up next to you and you hear, you think he's okay? I wonder if he's okay. He might be hurt. We got to be careful how we get him out. You think he's okay? And you stick your hand out and you go, Oh, he's okay. He's okay. Let's flip the car over. Okay, everybody get on the right side. You're laying there upside down. This is what you hear. Everybody get on the right side, grab the front tire, grab the left tire, pull the car up, and we'll flip it right side up so you can get out. And so they start to lift the car, and they go, here they come. And they all run away because the cars have come back around the track. So now you're laying there upside down with no belts on. The corner workers are gone, and the cars go by. And they're right by your head. They go by. It gets quiet. Here they come. Let's flip it over. And this goes on for like 3 laps. Every time the cars come around, they run away again. And that's my funny crash story.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Hanging upside down, wishing you hadn't undone your belt. Maybe wishing you hadn't hit the guy.
Very funny. Very funny.
So that's now a business story.
Okay.
I'll tell you a boat story too.
Okay.
I race sailboats. So we do a 256-mile race up in Lake Huron. We used to do it every year. We did 10 of them. The first year we do it, never did it before. It's a big race, second longest freshwater race in the world. I get my crew, we get there, the gun goes off, we start with 14 other boats in our class, and we sail away. We sail for 72 hours straight doing this race, long race. At the end of 72 hours, we finish the race. And as we come in, the officials come over and say, you didn't run the race, you're disqualified. We had gone by a shipping marker about a mile after the start on the wrong side and proceeded to race for another 255 miles, and we weren't in the race. They had thrown us out. So that's a funny. If you can't laugh at yourself, Bill, who can you laugh at?
Nobody.
Yeah. So then the last one, and this is one about executives. So I'm a young guy at Dana. I come into the office, and the president's secretary says, you've got an appointment to fly to Richmond, Indiana tomorrow to the piston ring plant. You're going with the two group vice presidents of Dana. They want you to meet them at the helicopter pad in front of corporate tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. So I show up, the 2 group vice presidents, gods. I mean, I'm like a peon at this company. These are gods, right? So the 2 of them, good morning, Mr. Caracci, good morning, good morning. So I get in the helicopter with them and we take off. Off we go. We're sailing along, and the one group vice president says to the other one, because a big corporate helicopter like a Learjet has buttons. You push this button for Coke, push this button for coffee, push this button for something you probably shouldn't be drinking, but so would you gentlemen like a coffee? Oh yes, we'd love a coffee. And we had big styrofoam cups so they wouldn't spill. He pushes the button. We're motoring along in a helicopter over Toledo. Now we're over Indiana. He pushes the button, fills up the cup, takes his finger off the button, and it's stuck. The button's stuck. The button's stuck. He's pushing the button. Hand me more cups. So we're handing him cups. So we got cups of coffee all over this helicopter. And he's yelling, John, the pilot's name is John, and there's a cutout in the helicopter bulkhead between you and the pilots. John. Okay, I'm gonna do a sound effect here deliberately. So he says, John, the button's stuck. And the pilot looks around and goes, darn. Button pops out. Does that every trip. So that was the first part of the helicopter story. He fixed it with his shoe. I don't have any idea how the helicopter costs. So we fly to Richmond. We get to Richmond. We're coming down. Helicopter comes down. Most dangerous time in a helicopter, at least the corporate guys said this, they were scared to death when you were low. Because if the copter conks out, it just, boom, it's down. There's no time to do anything. And so we're coming down, and at the piston ring plant, the big garbage truck guy is there, the BFI kind of guy. And he's going to empty the dumpster into his truck. He's got the dumpster on his truck, and he sees this cool helicopter coming. So he parks the truck on an X in the parking lot and goes to watch us land. Well, we're going to land on the X. So the pilots at this low altitude, while the two group VPs are freaking out because it's dangerous. The pilot's going, and the truck driver's going like this, and the pilot's going, the truck driver's like. So finally, they call the office on the phone on the helicopter. The office lady comes out, makes the truck move so we can land the helicopter on the X. And right then, I realized that those guys, no matter how big a job you got, no matter how big a big shot you got, no matter how smart you are, we still put our pants on the same way. So that was my corporate story.
Those are all great stories.
Well, there's a bunch of them, but you don't have time for them.
So Dave, we've talked you've touched on it. You're never really retired, so let's just call you sort of, kind of, maybe semi-retired. But you've touched on him here. You still are an avid sailor.
Yeah, race. That's what I do.
And are you racing cars anymore, or just sailing?
No.
Just sailing and sailing racing.
Yeah. When I retired, my old race car shop still exists.
Okay.
And they called me, and I went back for about probably 4 years, and was the logistics engineer for the team for 11 races every year in the American Le Mans Series, like the 12 hours of Sebring, the 6 hours at Mossport, places like that. And it's really, in being a logistics engineer, you calculate out the tire wear, you decide when they should change tires, when to call a car in for tires, when to call a car in for fuel, when to do all those different things. So that's what I did. So, which really is the same thing that I do on boats, because I'm the tactician on boats when we race. And it's the same thing that you do when you're running a marketing division or a division of the company. You're the leader's nothing but the tactician. Everybody else got the expertise. They're the ones driving the boat and trimming the sails.
Right.
So learned an important thing there too that we should throw in, and maybe you can include it somehow when you all do your edits. Racing sailboats, they teach you something big time. It's the number one thing of racing sailboats. It's called keep your head out of the boat. And keeping your head out of the boat means keep looking around at what's going on. Don't just concentrate on boat speed. You can see people in boats or in businesses that are adjusting this and fine-tuning that and adjusting this and fine-tuning that to make the boat go faster, to make the business ship better, to make the business sell more. But they don't have their head out of the boat. They're concentrating on the business. In the meantime, the environment, the water, the competition, the fleet, the competition, the business competitors, they're all going a different way, or the environment changed. Look at you here, Bill. You got your head out of the boat. You all have changed this place to fit the modern day technology, to fit the modern day needs. And so keeping your head out of the boat is the number one thing in racing and in anything that's competitive. I talked to a guy today that wants me to do the St. Petersburg Regatta with him. And when we talked about it, what we decided I should do if I go with him is keep my head out of the boat. That's my job.
So Dave, what great comments. Thank you so much. Very candid, very open, very insightful, terrific. Before we let you go, we have a tradition here to do something called the lightning round. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so questions I'm going to ask you.
Is it going to hurt?
Well, you'll have to tell me afterwards.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you 2 things and you're going to have to choose one.
Okay.
Okay. Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles.
Early bird or night owl?
Used to be an early bird. In retirement, neither.
Invisibility or immortality?
Probably, even though I've got a big ego, I probably would pick invisibility, because I don't like to make people feel self-conscious.
24 hours of Le Mans or the 24-hour regatta?
Regatta.
Lake or ocean sailing?
Lake. Great Lakes, which is a baby ocean.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, if you threw salt in Lake Erie, it'd be called a sea.
Right. Favorite race car?
The last one I designed and built from scratch.
Favorite race track?
Road Atlanta. When you go to Road Atlanta, out of 30 cars, only 5 of us will go fast. Everybody else backs off a little.
Favorite season to be in the state of Ohio?
I'd say probably fall.
Favorite season to be in the state of Florida?
Fall. Maybe I just like fall.
Dave, great to have you on AMN Drivetime,
Thanks,
sponsored by Lightens.
This has been a blast. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by Lightens. Lightens, your best source for OE quality automotive and heavy-duty accessory drive tensioning devices. We know tensioners because we invented them.